So next slide. Yeah, also, Sirika, I already saw that you are a French-speaking attendant. That's perfect. So today we have special interpretation in French. So just go to the bottom down, click on the interpretation button, and then click on French. And then you can also just mute the original language, which is me, but you will hear our French interpreter try to say everything for you. So that's very, very nice. Next slide. Yeah, so we're here with a nice team today. First, I want to give the word to Rika from CBI to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ailey, of course, and welcome everyone to this masterclass. I'll keep it short, but my name is Rika, and I work for the Dutch Center for the Promotion of Imports. We're commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and just like Orange Corners, we're part of the Dutch Enterprise Agency. And maybe it's nice to share with you that we're actually celebrating our 50th birthday this year. And I thought it was nice to tell, because in those 50 years, we have always worked with a lot of sector associations, but specifically with a lot of small and medium scale businesses and entrepreneurs like yourself in many different sectors and countries across the world. And in our projects, we have really at least aimed or tried to help SMEs increase their export, the export of their products and services to Europe and regional markets, but specifically in a sustainable way. So we focus a lot on decent work and climate adaptation, of course, a diverse workforce, but also youth employment. I want to keep it brief, but I think for CBI and for myself, it's really important, and we really believe that everybody should have an equal chance to participate in international trade and enjoy the benefits from it, of course. So we're very happy to organize this masterclass for you. And I'm looking forward to learn a lot about international trade, but specifically to learn a lot from you as well today. Thanks.
And welcome. Rika. Perfect, thanks. And from my side, at least from the Orange Corners side, my name is Ailey. You probably know me because I've been sending loads of emails and text messages, and you see me on the social media channels. That's not because I necessarily want to be in the spotlight, but I want to get you guys into the global Orange Corners alumni network. That's also why we're organizing these master classes. And we have a very, very cool agenda for 2022 coming up, loads of activities, also globally. So please keep an eye on everything that we're doing because we're doing it for you. So I'm very happy that to see you guys here, and hope to see a lot more of you guys in the future. So that's my side from Orange Corners. I want to give the word to Tova today, who's going to be our host.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ailey. Thank you, Rika, and also a very warm welcome from me. And as you already heard, it's our third masterclass this year. We started back in July, I think it was the first one, when we looked into getting ready to export and what was needed. And perhaps some of you joined that masterclass already or watched it later on, as it was also recorded, just like this one is. And in October, we had our second masterclass when we looked at trade flows and requirements, a little bit sort of the topics that you need to look into when you start preparing, when you start thinking about going abroad beyond borders. And that brought us to today's topic, where we do look to go beyond borders and look at how international buyers think. And we're going to do that by approaching a couple of different subjects. So we've had the welcome and the introduction we will have in a bit, because as you already heard, we have a great panel here today who will be sharing their expertise and their experience. And if we look at topics specifically, when we say, okay, you're looking to go abroad, you're looking to export, go beyond borders, then we look at two topics. We look at trends. What are international trends and how do they affect you and your business? And we also want to approach the topic of how do international buyers think? And this is exactly the reason why we have our great panel here today, because we have, and I will now stop sharing so that we can get them in the full picture here. we have two European buyers who do not only know everything about importing to Europe, but they also know what it's like to start up a company outside Europe and to start preparing to go abroad. So Remco and Milko, I will actually hand over to you so that you can introduce yourself. Can I start with you, Remco? And CBI expert, it says very nicely also behind your name. And I think that applies to the European part of the panel. Indeed, we represent CBI here today.
Yes, thank you, Tove. Well, my name is Remco. I work both as a buyer and as a sector expert for CBI, and I work in the home decoration and home textile sector. And I think I've been working for CBI for the last almost 15 years, since 2007, both in Africa and Asia, and mainly in what we call business export coaching programs, in which we assist companies who have the ambition to export to Europe. And we assist them in developing all their processes and product development in such a way that they have a good offer for the European buyers. Also, I have my own company for which I import from Asia, which also gives me, first-hand experience in what it actually means to deal with companies abroad and how you work together on developing products that are suitable for the European markets and other markets outside Europe. Thank you.
Brilliant. And that means that you have experience from both sides and with a lot of different products and materials and a lot of different businesses. So just encouraging everyone who is listening right now, start asking those questions in the chat, because you're more than welcome to put them in the chat and we will post them to Remco and he will be happy to answer them for you. And then let's go over to our second European panel member. That's Milko. And I hope that you can also be, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, now we have you both, Milko Ricken. And you are also representing all parts of the globe, I was going to say, and different supply chains, but you have a different sector focus.
Yeah, different sector focus, but also a bit different point in the supply chain, I think, than Remco. So that way we supplement each other a little bit. Well, my sector that I'm specialized in is originally flowers, cut flowers and plants. But lately I've been working more and more in fruit and vegetables. And for CBI, I've been working, I think, since 2005 or so as a sector expert comparable to Remco. And I've been working a lot in Africa, South America, and in Asian countries. First, again, in the flower industry, and at the moment, a lot in fruit and vegetable, and more specifically in the dates. I've got a big program in Jordan, in the Middle East, and we're working with 18 companies that are growing dates, medjool dates, in huge plantations. Yeah, my own background is more in market research, actually, market research and trade promotion. So in the 1990s, long before I became sector expert, I was already working regularly for CBI as a market researcher. I've been writing a lot of studies on different topics, from car parts to custom jewelry to whatever, any product almost. But after that, I worked at the flower auction in Aalsmeer. And as you maybe know, Holland is a bit of a flower country. A lot of flowers from all over the world come to Holland, are being traded in Holland and being re-exported. And one of the main hubs in Holland is the flower auction. And I used to work there as a market analyst and for the marketing department. But after a few years, I got fed up with sitting in an office, and I decided to start my own company. And my own company is a consultancy company since 2002. And CBI is one of the main clients for me. And most people in the world, I think, know me as a CBI expert. So I hope today to be able to share a little bit of my experience and things that I've seen throughout the years in flowers and in fruit and vegetables.
Yeah, and you both of you also, you work with importers also. Well, Remco, you already said you are an importer yourself, basically, because you have a brand. Yeah. So you really know both sides. And actually, Milko, I was going to say, if you say the 90s, going back to the 90s, working for CBI, I think it's really one of the record long people. People usually stay long with the CBI. If we start working with the CBI, we tend to stay. But 90 still sounds like you might be a record holder.
I remember my first year that I finished my university and I went to work for a consultancy firm. My first job, my first assignment was for CBI.
Yeah, me too, but I was a bit later still. I'm not going to go into that though, because instead, thank you very much, Milka and Remco, and we will call our third panel member we have here today, which is one of your alumni from Orange Corners, and that is John. Please introduce yourself. Very happy to have you on board here.
Hi. Thank you very much for the opportunity as well. My name is John Nanado Francois, and as I've been introduced, I am an OCIF alumni. Okay, so my company is based in the Akuapem area in Ghana. This covers about 3 districts, and what we do is we are in coffee farming, processing, and distribution. We produce the Asili premium coffee, which we are exporting to the United States at the moment. We use the momentum from the Asili premium coffee to get the 3 districts planting coffee, actually, to be able to create jobs. The major idea is to serve as a catalyst for socioeconomic change and rural development. With the OCIF, actually, we produced the Asili steep coffee, which is more suitable to my local markets. It is effectively coffee that is packaged in filter bags, effectively. So it's still affordable for most people, but it's fairly easy to use. And it's not the really excessively processed stuff. It's naturally roasted coffee. So it's high quality. So basically, we are democratizing access to quality.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. So I'm not as vastly experienced as the other panelists, but what I can share is the perspective of indigenous African entrepreneur who's trying to effectively break borders or break barriers and go into the foreign markets. So we are at very different points in our careers, I think, but I think valuable perspective all the same. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share.
Yes, and I think that is the strength of our panel today. And we have one more member in our panel, and that is Ethar, who has joined us now also, and should be able to join us here also and introduce herself, calling in from Sudan. And she has also a very fascinating business. Ethar, can you unmute and present yourself, please? Let's see if it works. You are still muted. We can see you, but I think the picture froze. So I think we're having a little bit of a technical hiccup there. So before we turn to Ethar, I'm sure that we're going to hear from her later on in this session. I'm glad that she could join. But as I said, we have 2 topics that we want to discuss today, and it will mainly be you sharing, of course, in this great panel. That's why we have you here. But I also want to present a little bit so that we're all on the same page and know what we're talking about. And our first topic is trends. And if you were, you gentlemen in this panel, since we're waiting for Ethar, if you were to describe trends and what you think of when I say that in just one sentence, what would it be? What are trends to you, Remco?
Well, in one sentence, I would say always make the distinction between short-term and long-term trends.
Yeah, and which one would you go for? You get a second sentence now.
Good. Yeah, we're bargaining here. I would definitely go for the long-term trend, because as a business, that gives you more time to prepare your products, and it also gives more what you could call shelf life to your products. If you go with short-term trends, which you could also define as fashion trends, it means that the look of your product is more short-lived than when you go with long-term trends. And also, if you look at that from the point of sustainability, you could, if you really focus on short-term trends, you could have a product that is physically still in good shape, but could be outdated by the look of it. And well, from the perspective of sustainability, that doesn't work.
So we have a sustainable long-term trend. Agree, Milka, or something you could add?
Yeah, I think trends is always, as I told, I used to be a market researcher in the 90s, you know, that was how I was starting my my career, let's say. And so I'm always looking a little bit like trends, that's market trends. But when you become a CBI expert, and Remco probably recognize it, and you start speaking to people who produce products all over the world, for them, trends can be market trends, but also you have production trends, technology trends. And when you start exporting, something else becomes important, logistical trends. So trends can be very diverse. And as it is so diverse, I think it's always important to remember, is every trend relevant for me or not? And what does it mean for me? So it's always a challenge to understand trends.
Yeah, good one. And John, I think when we first met up before this meeting, one of the first sentences you used when you talked about your company was trends, industry trends, you mentioned.
Yes,
what is
yes.
trends to you?
Well, luckily for us, the current market trends, which are effectively encompassed by sustainable, I mean, off-takers looking at sustainability, impact, etc., are beneficial to us because we don't really have to currently tweak our business plans, etc., because we were doing some of these things before. So it's kind of been a good fit. So we found ourselves again in a very fortunate position. Yeah, so effectively all encompassed trends are the same as what I believe Remco and Milko were mentioning, but we are just ending up a beneficiary of the situation as well, once more.
You're surfing the waves of the trends, basically.
Indeed, indeed. Indeed.
Okay, let me then quickly look into what trends are and share with everyone. And after that, I hope we will have Ether also with us Stable Network online, because I do want to give her the opportunity also to share her company. So what are trends and what do we talk about when we talk about trends? And I would like to remind everyone also now listening in, we'll talk just for a few minutes basically, and then we're back to our panel. So in the meantime, do make use of the chat and post any questions that come to mind. You've now heard who everyone is, and you may have questions you would like to post to them. Please do so by making use of the chat. So trends, what are they? And I will basically also refer a little bit to Remco's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 sentences definition here, because we are talking about the longer term shifts and developments that we see, movements, and they very often they don't happen just in one place. So perhaps you can have some occasions where it really just takes place in the suburbs of a big city or whatever, but usually it would then start there or be an interpretation of something which happens quite often at a global level, at least at a continent level. That said, everything going on, and this you can follow just by reading the regular news. So you don't even need a fashion magazine or what have you. These are not the trends we talk about. We talk about the longer term shifts and how they translate into what's important to you. Indeed, as was already said, that can differ per sector and that can differ per region. And depending on where you want to market your product or your service, it may take different shapes. And the reason why we bring it in today is because if you look to sell your product to a foreign market, it's very important to make sure that it fits whatever people are looking for in that market. And well, John was just saying, basically their company, they fit all the trends that are going on, and that's of course really great. And if you don't, then you just need to go back and see, okay, so can I make adjustments how to fit them, or perhaps I can just make adjustments in how I communicate about it, because you may fit the trends without noticing it and knowing it, and also not knowing how to communicate about it in that case. And we'll try to make it a bit more concrete by looking at 3 examples of global trends that are going on that I know that most of you will recognize. We talk about sustainability, we talk about health, and we talk about technology and innovations. These happen all over the place and they're relevant to most sectors. And I will look into them one by one. Sustainability was already mentioned, by the way, but it is certainly a development that is happening and will remain. So it's certainly a longer term trend that we're talking about here. And I will then look per trend that we have here into examples of what it means for different sectors and products. Now, just to point out, we already said this is a CBI webinar organized together with Orange Corners. CBI.eu, that's where you have the web page, where you can find a lot of market studies per sectors. And Milko referred to them already because he used to write them. He's still involved perhaps somewhere behind the scenes. But we have several different sectors on cbi.eu where you can find out what trends are and opportunities per sector. So look up the sector you work in and then click on trends. And there you will generally find exactly what I just said, a translation from longer term developments and shifts and what it means for that particular sector. So let's start with sustainability. What do we know about the sustainability trend? And I'm sure many of you will recognize that it's all about certification. That could be just a starting point, actually, because moreover, we want more. Certification is sort of the baseline for many sectors. We want to know that everything is natural, sometimes that it's locally produced, which can be an advantage if you sell on the local market, but could be something you need to explain if you look to export. We look to have it natural, also meaning no chemicals, but that's just the environmental part. We also have the social part of sustainability, where we could, for instance, look for good labor conditions. And if we look now recent developments, we also want to keep products and materials in use as long as possible. So we don't want any waste. Instead, we recycle and we reuse materials which have been used for certain products previously. We now recycle them and turn them into new products. So this is just in a very quick pace examples of what we mean with this sustainability trend development, long-term shift going on. And if we are to look at what that means for specific sectors and products, you may see, for instance, that we shift to eating more plant-based food. So we're leaving out meat because we know it, meat and animal farming has a huge impact on the environment. And instead we look for alternatives. So you get something like burgers made from plant protein. This is one of the trends popping up for sustainability reasons. Another one, like I said, recycle. If we have H&M here, from bottles to fashion, let's clean up. So we use plastic waste, plastic bottles, and turn them into fabric, which are then made into clothes. So we have a circle going here. And a similar example you see to the right here, where we have the sofas made from old denim jeans. So here again, we have a huge multinational, IKEA, and one of their icon sofas that they make. And they team up with a much smaller company, recycling and reusing denim jeans and turning them into a new fabric for their sofa. These are just examples, quite random, and for your specific sector, they could look completely different, but the idea is there. So you try to work with the environment, let's say, rather than against it, and it has to be natural reuse, stay in the loop, so to say. So that was sustainability, one of the major trends going on and affecting most sectors. Health is another one. And health, of course, we can think of food. So we think of diets. Again, certification plays a little bit of a role here, because also when we think about organic, it's not just an environmental concern. It's also that we perceive it as healthier. And again, we have the natural one. Vegetarian diets become more common. But then if we move away from the food a little bit, it's also how we live and how we sit. Let's look at this home office chair, for instance. It has to be ergonomic, it has to be comfortable, it has to be healthy for our body, also from that point of view. And of course, being outside, being out in nature, moving around, sporting, taking care of our bodies, not just by eating, but also the way we move and do sports. And here you can see already that it will affect several different sectors. And for instance, then, if we look at the healthy food alternatives that we have, then we can get into different grains or seeds or what have you, something that becomes superfood. That can become interesting. And there we can also, it can become so interesting that we can skip the local bit that we heard from the environmental point of view to still look further away for exotic, healthy food products like fonio, as we show here in the picture. Our home office, I already said, I can assure you, I don't sit on a chair like that, but I would like to bike once in a while because it could be good actually to stay fit while you work. I'm just sitting down plain right now, but it is something that we can consider fit at work. And likewise, the whole sporty lifestyle, it also translates into not just sport clothing when you actually actively practice sports, but also as a fashion style, let's say. So you can also just have clothes which look and show that you are the sporty type, whether or not you're doing sports at that moment. So again, it's something that can translate differently into different sectors. And everything I show here, they're just screenshots from different websites. Now, then I still want to mention the third one that I use as an example. There are more, so these 3 ones are just the ones that fit most sectors, I think. And I think technological innovation, it's sort of everywhere, so you cannot really get around it. You see them in products, lots of apps. You see them also in supply chains and in production processes, which I know Ethar, if her network cooperates after this short presentation, I'm sure she's going to be able to tell you more about it from her business. But it also means that we introduce new products, such as electrical cars, for instance, and they disrupt the current system to such an extent that we actually get a whole new infrastructure building up around them. So technology and innovation go hand in hand, and we see it everywhere and can be interesting for several different sectors. And if we look at it here, the first picture here basically just represents an app. I'm sure you're aware of it. If you look at your mobile phone, how many apps have you not installed on them, downloaded? And they do anything from just really games and fun to services to information to finding your way. So an app can offer any kind of solution to any kind of problem that you can think of. In the middle here, we have the supply chain perspective that I mentioned. And this means that, to put it brief, a producer in any foreign country far away actually can get closer to the end user, because technology allows us to skip a couple of steps or middlemen. So you may have heard of blockchain, for instance, but you can also just communicate faster. Like we meet up now, we're from several different countries in one meeting right now. And if you apply that's the same idea, but then through a supply chain, and you place an order and you sell it and you have a guarantee and you pay and so on and so on. It's a new way of looking at how to supply a market. And there are many different examples available. Blockchain is one of them, as I mentioned. And then, of course, you can just apply technology to existing products. So here we have LED lights in gloves, and it's just a fun thing. It doesn't really solve a real problem, I think we could agree on. But it will be fun during dark winter nights here in the cold, when children run about outside playing in the snow, if you like. So this is also a way of looking at it. It's just something you can add to make your product more attractive, if you like. And I think I will leave it at that for now, because I'm now very curious both to hear what our panel thinks about all this, and first of all to see if we have Ethar online, and if she could introduce herself and her company. Let's give it another try. Ethar, I think I hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
perfect.
Great, welcome. Please share yourself and who in your company.
Hello everyone, I'm Ithar Yusuf Ahmed. I'm from Sudan. And I guess the best way to introduce myself is to tell you what I do. So I work in Akhdar. I founded Akhdar, and in Akhdar, we care about post-harvest losses. What we do is actually dehydrate horticultural crops to produce more shelf-stable product. What we do here in Sudan, that we have 40% post-harvest losses in agricultural product, and I actually grown up in a farmer's house, so I know how it is for a farmer when they suffer this loss. I know the impact of that loss, and I studied science, physics to be exact, and from my study, I have learned about harvesting the energy of the sun. And how can solar energy we do is we design solars that we can use to dehydrate agricultural products. We focus on perishable products such as mango and banana, which is our main products right now. And we produce it in a hygienic way. We preserve the nutritious value of it. All of this using the energy of the sun, which is culturally relevant because we, in our culture, dehydration is well known. Yet it's not used in a proper way. We introduced the thermal drying technology where we preserve the nutritious value, where we do it in a hygienic way, where we meet the health need of our community, and we're helping the farmers to actually reduce their losses and hopefully to eliminate them eventually. So when you talked about technology innovation, this is what we focus on. We focus on the technologies that can enable farmers to actually increase the shelf life of the product, because energy access is an issue in farming community. Only third of Sudan have energy access, and right now I'm suffering from that. So this is why it's very important to find the solutions that does not only solve the storage issue, but actually extend the shelf life of the product itself, producing healthy products that we are in need of. And if you know more about Africa, you would realize that dried fruits are not easy to find around here. So it's kind of a new product to the market. It's a healthy one. So there is another trend we're working towards. And of course, the solar energy part is the sustainability. In a time of climate change and in COVID-19 pandemic, there is need for taking care of our health and producing sustainably in a way that doesn't only do well by the environment, but by the farmers themselves. So we focus on the farmers, we work with the same, we focus on not harming the environment.
Wow, thank you very much, Ithar. And just to point out, I put together the slides before I had talked to Ithar. So the fact that you mentioned exactly the same trends as important to your company has nothing to do with this presentation, but very much, I think, of you observing what's needed in the market and how you can answer that need based on the trends you see happening, right?
Exactly, the needs that you talked about is actually the need we can see right here in the local market, and it's definitely the need in the international market.
Brilliant, and that's also where you look to go in the future, and for the moment you are in the local market, right?
Yes, for the moment we're in the local market, but we're definitely preparing for the international market.
Great, thank you very much. And let's also look at the other three participants here. And maybe, John, I can start with you so that we hear from the alumni first now this time, and then we switch to the European side. How do you recognize the trends that we just discussed, and how do you see them in your company and you are exporting, and the relevance when you export? Or perhaps if you see other trends more important, also please share.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I do recognize some of the trends that were in the previous slide. I'd like to take it maybe from a dual perspective, that is from the product perspective and the transactional perspective. So what we are realizing is that there are wholesale off-takers. This is when you're starting to export on a slightly larger scale. The wholesale exporters look at majorly maybe price, your branding and marketability, as well as the quality of your product. So effectively, price is the deal breaker usually, because the wholesaler needs to be able to import it there and then distribute it and make a profit margin. That's the only way it's sustainable business for them. Now, the branding and marketability is where the trends are very prominent, because effectively the wholesale distributor needs to ensure that the product that he or she is importing into their country is something that the end users will like. So end users are nowadays looking at sustainability, like climate change, reforestation, gender impact, fair trade and livelihood, circular economy or zero waste, because effectively the end user is now more conscientious with their purchases. That is, they're trying to effectively put their money where their values are effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, the wholesale off-takers generally look at maybe, okay, what trends do your product fit? Is it creating employment? Is it highly traceable? Are you fair trade? Are you which of the SDGs are you addressing? You know, so that's another aspect as well that we see from the product perspective. And then, of course, lastly, it's also quality, because once you tick the price and the branding and marketability boxes as well, then the quality aspect, because once people try it once and it's looking good, then they'd like to, of course, be able to have some repeat buyers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if it's perfect price and you're doing a lot of good, but it's not good to taste, then, I mean, there's no real long-term sustainability. Transactionally, what I've experienced so far is that compliance, that is, the various countries have various degrees for compliance. That's FDA. For me, luckily, being in coffee, the compliance requirements are not as rigorous as maybe I'm sure Mr. Milko will tell you that vegetables, it's a different ball game. I think I know someone who has who deals in vegetables, and their compliance is just through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, also there's the shipping. That's the shelf life of the product, moving from Ghana, where I am, to, for example, the United States. We had some issues recently, actually, where there's a 3-month delay now, and then that also comes to another aspect of the transaction, which is the legalities and liabilities, because now that, for example, we have a 3-month delay, it's eating into the shelf life. So now who's liable now? You know, is Asili in trouble or is the wholesaler going to be absorbing it, or are we both going to have to just take it as, hey, this is a cost of doing business, let's split it, and then let's continue, because we are trying to build a sustainable supply chain into the US, which will be beneficial for us all. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of both transactional and product wise, these are some of the experiences that I have from my end, that I can see kind of the trends, especially considering technology as well. That's at the transactional end, where I know that there's nitrogen flushing as well now, so it can keep the coffee fresh forever. But then again, there becomes the date systems where, so do we date it forward or do we date it back? You know, so combating shelf life becomes another game altogether. But this is what so far we are experiencing from my end.
Wow, great. Lots of things going on. Thank you very much for sharing also. And actually, if we can also ask Milko, because you already referred also to the fruit and veg, etc. Milko, why are trends important? And do you recognize what you hear going on right here? Because you also said that you have trends everywhere, and I totally agree. And we just heard also you have it product level, you have it supply chain level.
And also the way that you explain the different types of trends, the main trends that you see in general. If you look at the fruit and vegetable industry, or the dates, or the flowers in my case, you recognize all these trends. They are all relevant in each industry in one way or another way, and they give the direction of where the industry is going for the coming years. And if you have a company, you set up a company with a certain idea in mind, some things that you are good at, or because your location in the world, you are good at something, and you want to grow your company through exporting, then you're kind of riding the waves of these trends. And it's kind of a minimum requirements for you to become successful. What I've seen in several industries and countries is that trends are important to understand because it is a way to understand your customer. If you want to sell something, you want to sell it to somebody, your customer. So you need to understand those customers and what drives your customers. And these trends are, well, the main drivers usually for customers. So these trends, you take the information you get from these trends to understand a little bit about what the market is and how you want to position yourself. Because you want to have specific product development, you want to position yourself towards certain market segments in such an optimal way that you have the best results looking at the trends that are going on.
Yeah.
But one point that I think is important to note, what I have seen from the different projects that I've done, is that you should not go blindly on the trends, because one of the biggest risks, in my view, is that people are just following the main trends and everybody is copying those trends. And copycat behavior is a big risk in my experience. If you go to a certain region, wherever in the world, being Africa or South America or Asia, then it always surprises me how it is possible that an entire region produces the same and is doing the same. Well, there are so many possibilities to distinguish yourself and to just stand out a little bit. And to be able to position yourself in such a way to distinguish yourself, you still have to understand these trends. And they have to be in line with the trends, of course. So trends
you're in line, but you add something to it, you mean?
You add something or you find your own trends, because there are many trends that are supplementing each other or are maybe even conflicting with each other. There's always an opposite trend going on in the same moment. Maybe it's for a niche market segment, or maybe it's for quite a big market segment, but it's important to find your own trend and to work on that trend and translate it to your own company and to position yourself accordingly.
Yeah.
Don't be a copycat. I think that is important to keep in mind when you're looking at trends, because you're not the only one who's reading that market study, not the only one who thinks, hey, that health idea, that's a good idea. That's something that I'm going to make use of. That's what's going to make me rich and successful. But there are many people reading that same report, and you have to find your own way and to position yourself, distinguish yourself.
So perhaps if you understand the trends at the more global level, but you make a different translation into what it means for your product, because perhaps that could be your own, adding your own value as a company to it. Let's see what Remco has to say about all of this, because I see you're following the conversation and I'm sure you have something you would like to add.
Well, absolutely. To continue where Milko left off, there's a lot of trends and a lot of people have access to information on those trends, and how you deal with those trends is actually how you implement them in your own company, your own business, is what gives your unique signature. For instance, take one trend which is globally recognized at the moment in the home decoration and home textile sector, is that there has been for quite a while now, and it will continue also, is a reappreciation for products that are handmade, as opposed to produce products that are produced in thousands by machines. Now, if you look at your own business and you see, for instance, the traditional techniques that you use in production that are different than the techniques that are happening in other countries, that allows you to surf on that handmade trend with your own traditional input. However, to make it acceptable for a European buyer, you have to look a little bit into what do these people like. It's not that your traditional technique would be one-on-one, 100% liked immediately by buyers from, for instance, Europe, because this is a different part of the world and people have a different taste. I usually also always make the jokes that Europeans have limited brain capacity, in the sense that if you go heavy on pattern, take it easy on the color, because otherwise it's too much for the European brain. Or are you heavy on color, take it easy on pattern. We like things a little, you could say a little bit more modest in their expression. That's easier for us to digest. So do inform yourself and then draw your own conclusions, preferably based upon what you're good at. That could be a certain technique, it could be a certain raw material that you are using, but what makes you unique as a business? And sometimes it is your own creativity. And in that sense, within that scope of the trends that are hot at the moment, or you could make something which would be more trend setting than trend following, which makes you stand out. Another important point with respect to trends, at least in the sector that I work in, is that if you show some knowledge, some appreciation for the fact that you know what's going on more or less in Europe, that helps buyers to identify you, because when they see your products and they see this person has given thought to this particular product, how it should look to be suitable for the European taste, it makes you a possible worthy partner for them to work with. Because what you see in a lot of European importers, that they usually don't buy the product exactly as you make it, but they look at your product almost like a bit of a diploma. They look at your product and they see a certain technique, a certain quality of finish, a certain raw material, and they look at it and they think, this is interesting. Maybe I could work with this particular company, but I will give my own input as an importer, and together we could maybe develop a product which is suitable for my market. And in that sense, your product is almost like a diploma because it shows what you're capable of.
So on the one hand, we're bringing in the unique features, and perhaps if we talk in terms of food, it would be flavors, but we need to blend it a little bit to fit the foreign taste, Europe, as you mentioned in this case, but it could be any foreign market basically. And I was just thinking how you say, well, you call it limited brain capacity because you're going to have to handle patterns and colors. I'm from Scandinavia, and Scandinavian design is obviously known for being, you know, less is more. But I think it's the same with a lot of food flavors. You know, we want the exotic flavors, but certainly not too spicy and certainly not too hot. So, you know, start from indeed what you have and what you're good at, and then make it blend enough for, in case you look at Europe, for the European audience. And I'm just going to tell you also in the chat, when you said handmade, you got a cheer immediately from Victorine saying, yes, handmade. And how can I connect with some fashion handmade brands to learn from them? If you have any tips, Remco, on that one, I will let you either answer here or in the chat. And I can also say to all of you also, all the questions that come in, we will also add some links that we share after this webinar, so you will get sources. But Remco, if you would like to answer quickly, that's okay also.
As a quick reply to that question, dependent on the sector you're active in, but what you can always do is try and research trade fairs in your sector. And those trade fairs that take place in Europe, they usually have a lot of exhibitors. They have exhibitors like you, so producers from outside Europe, but they also have brands and wholesalers, importers that sell to retailers in their turn. And those people could be your buyer. So if you research the exhibitor list on trade fairs in your sector already, especially those European companies, they could, for instance, be your client. And in that sense, you can learn a lot from them simply by going to their website, see what kind of materials they use, see what kind of techniques they appreciate, see how they design their products, how they sell, to whom they sell. There's a wealth of information there at a mouse click, almost.
Yeah, and trade fairs, just to add to that, we already mentioned CBI and the market information. You will find trade fairs there as well. And in the email that we send out after this webinar, we will include links to the most common ones from the sectors that we know that are present now also in this webinar. So that we can at least share. And I know also in other sectors, trade fairs, and indeed, as you say, look at the exhibitors and look at everything that you can click on online. That's a great way of doing market research, really. Also, online is becoming easier all the time. Now, looking at the time, I would like to bring this conversation a bit broader and look at what buyers look at, how they think, when they look for their suppliers. And with that, I will just quickly share, this will tie in very nicely, John, with everything you mentioned, because I think you mentioned everything from A to Z that you were working on and where you saw trends playing a role. But that's a little bit how international buyers, of course, they're also faced with a lot of different aspects to consider. So I would first, again, like to share this time a very, very short slide so we know what we're talking about. And then we will continue again the discussion with our panel and with you in the chat. So please keep sharing your questions also. This one we already had. And now we're going to dig into the minds of international buyers. And basically what I want to touch upon, and like I said, I think John will recognize several of the things you mentioned already, as will all of you listening to John. A buyer considers many different aspects when he looks for suppliers and also for new suppliers. One of them, of course, is requirements. I call them here. It can be certification. It can be, John mentioned, coffee is not that bad. But if you go into fruit and veg, it may be much stricter, it requires certifications, etc., etc. Another thing, of course, is availability. So say you do signal that there is a need that could be met in the market and that you could fill that gap, only you need to get those products from somewhere. And do you have them there where you can reach those products? That will be an issue and has to do also with location, of course, because say you are a company and you have all your suppliers based in Asia, to go for that one product which is only available in Africa will be a bigger decision. It will require more of an effort, more costs, more of an investment than adding something similar from another Asian or regional, wherever you are, supplier. So location and what you can get there will play a role, because a supplier, an importer, sorry, of course, also needs to make sense of his suppliers. And of course, what we just discussed, the demand there is in a market and the trends and how the products that you offer as a supplier, how they fit those market trends. And as was also mentioned, what are consumers willing to pay for? And this also, if you then add to your product, as was also mentioned, and you can add to it with one of the trends going on, the sustainability, or if you add the LED lights in the gloves, which was probably not a sustainable example, but still, that could just give that little extra that can sort of make the difference so that someone becomes interested in that product. Now, I will leave it at that. As I said, I'd much rather talk to our panel here. So do keep those questions coming in the chat. And I will stop sharing again. Basically, and bring in the whole panel again here with me, so I don't see only myself in a large picture. Thank you very much, Eli or Hanne. So basically, we know that a buyer, of course, is part of the world where he lives in. He's influenced on what's going on. And we also hear from the Orange Corners companies. They are starting up and they're working with everything in one go. And if we now start on the European side again, Remco and Milko, if you could bring in a little bit of focus, what is the most important thing when an importer comes to a potential buyer? What do they pay attention to? Because we all know that starting up a business, you need to pay attention to so many different aspects of your company. So if we can bring any sort of focus from an international buyer's point of view, what would be your first tip on how to get started? And Remco, I see you unmute, so I think you are ready with an answer.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it yourself. The word is focus.
Yeah, but where do you focus? What do you put your focus on?
You focus on your strong point. Like for instance, rather than showing a wide array of products, a whole range of different products, different techniques, different raw materials, etc., you look more like a trader than a specialist. And European importers would always be looking for a specialist. So if you are able to show that you are particularly good at 1, 2, maybe 3 things, then you portray yourself as a specialist rather than a generalist. And this is what people are looking for, because importers, if you are lucky enough, they are looking for long-term relationships with people that they can actually work with. And sometimes they do invest quite a bit of time before you actually come to the part where they place the order. Yeah, I know of importers in home decoration, home textiles. They sometimes work for 1.5, 2 years with a producer to get everything right from the point of view of having a long-term relationship, because it's easier to work with people that you know and whose weaknesses and whose strong points you have recognized over the years than it is to randomly pick something here and pick something there. So try to portray yourself as a specialist, somebody who knows what he or she is doing in your specific sector.
So that could be a technique, for instance, if we're talking about handmade, and that technique can then be put in different ways to make the fashion that is prevailing in the market at the moment. Something like this, is that how we should interpret it?
Absolutely, yeah. For instance, I just traveled for CBI to Bangladesh, and then we were working on product selections, and we checked out all the products with people that they are not really good at, in the sense that, it's very hard for me to source this raw material. Then we said, check it out, because the moment somebody comes for this, you have to say, yeah, I can do it, but. So focus on that material that you can get in abundance and that you know how to work with, and try to make variation on that particular theme. And then by the moment people see your stuff, they go like, okay, this is definitely somebody who has mastered the skill of working with this particular raw material.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that focus not only towards the buyer also brings focus in. If you say, okay, I'm not going to work with the other material anymore, it actually saves you time also. You can put that time, spend it more wisely.
Absolutely. And that makes the level of your work, you are able to reach a higher level, because if you have to divide your attention over different techniques, different materials, of course, you are limited in the time you can allocate to that particular material.
Yeah. And here we talk about products from the European side. Milko, would you also look at it in a similar way when we talk about fresh? And now I call everything you do fresh.
Maybe a bit different, because fresh has a couple of specific characteristics, I think. But well, I talk about this topic, of course, a lot with exporters in the flower trade, for instance. And if you ask them, so what's the most important for your customers? They always, well, the first idea is the price. Well, if you talk to importers, it's always the least, not the least important, but it's like a basic requirement that you got a correct price, are able to supply at the right price. But something that's maybe a bit more different in horticulture, in flowers, fruit and vegetable, is that importers often work with supply calendars. You know, nowadays everybody wants to eat pineapple or mango or avocado all year round. But yeah, natural products are not produced all year round in every place. So they have different areas in regions in the world where they source their products. So that is always important in horticulture, that the products are available and that they need, for instance, a supplier in a specific time period of the year. But something that I think always surprises me, that when you really start speaking to importers, for instance, with a large importer of flowers in Aalsmeer in Holland located, and you ask them, what's important for you? And then they start explaining, well, everybody thinks we are making a lot of money here. We have got these big buildings and we are doing a lot of turnover. But actually, our margin is very small. An importer, a trader in Holland typically has only 1-2% margin in the end of the year on the product. So what for him is very important is that he can do business at a very low risk. He just wants to buy something, low risk. He wants to be sure that everything is okay, no surprises, and he wants to resell it and earn a bit of profit on it. And the more he can resell without a lot of risk, the more money he can make in the end. And this translates into that you see a lot of risk aversion, and the importers want to work with exporters who they can trust. So long-term relationship is important in horticulture. It's something that Remco also mentioned. The importer is not looking for a hit and run exporter. He wants to have somebody who plays fair and that he can trust, and that is almost becoming like a family member of him, and he is also able to invest a little bit in it. And yeah, also like Remco explained that he's not looking for a ready-made product or exporter, but he wants to have an exporter that he sees has potential, and together they want to grow. And I think that's something that really stands out. That's something that most serious importers are really looking for, to build a long-term relationship, to have a nice partnership and earn a bit of money for a longer time than just a hit and run strategy.
And that sounds great, of course, if you have already start up a relationship with an importer, but how do you get in between? How do you get selected to begin with? Because he has all these long-term relationships going already with his existing suppliers.
So you have to show that you have potential, that you have that you know what you are doing, that you know what you can offer, and that you have potential to grow and to be able to become that preferred supplier to the importer.
So you show the focus to be reliable, the risk aversion, and in Remco's sector, that specific little thing that makes you the best within that technique or whatever you have, the style, the extra. And
ideally you have something unique, of course, but that's not always easy to have something unique. And in horticulture, something unique is often related with the location where you have your farm. But in case of Remco, there are other characteristics that makes an exporter unique. And that's for every industry different, I think.
Yeah, and the season perhaps, or the production method, like Ethar with her dried fruit. Ethar, because you, if I can go to you now, Ethar, because you are also preparing to go abroad, and do you recognize any of these tips, saying also bring in focus and show that you're unique? Are these things you think about?
Actually, it's exactly what we were thinking about. When it comes to the focus, we actually noticed this from the local market first, because it matters that we were only focusing on 2 products and we provide them in different forms. So we have dried mango and banana. We provide it in a form of rolls, in a form of chips, and in a form of powder. And sometimes we add flavors, we add sugar, depends on the orders we have. So we have this point of focusing on these 2 products and focusing on how to develop them in terms of quality and, of course, in terms of delivering to match the local market. And when it comes to international market, the biggest challenge that we are having, and we think this is why we're taking time to prepare, that international buyers want a stable relationship. They want someone who can provide them continuously with the product, and with the political instability in Sudan and with our port being open and closed irregularly, that's an issue for us, because whenever we talk to a buyer, this is one of the main concerns for them. Quality control is a given. Sometimes for the product to be organic or not, it's a part that's also important. So the certification is important. Paying attention to what kind of flavors we add into our products, that's important. The packaging is important. Fly sustainably, and that depends on us being able to ship sustainably. And that's the biggest issue we face here in Sudan, not just me, but many other exporters here in Sudan are facing. So the biggest part of preparing is actually putting plans, being able to analyze them, because it's clear that this is the most important part for buyers, because quality control can be agreed on, certification can happen. All of this takes time and some effort and can happen. But when it comes to these circumstances like we have in Sudan that out of our hand, we need to have plans, and we need to show that buyers that we are capable of that. So that's a big part. So everything that was just mentioned is exactly the checkbox that we discovered while trying to understand how buyers think and what they want, and we're trying to meet these needs.
Yeah, this sounds
and
excellent.
It's actually getting us to think that it's not just the European Union. Yeah.
No, please go ahead.
I was just saying it's not just the European market. There is a local market. There is other African countries. There is a Gulf countries. So when you look at international buyers, you don't just look at one region. You look at different regions, understand the buyers, because every region has different needs and buyers have something different to ask for. But one thing that's constant and stable in every region is that they want sustainability in supply. If you cannot guarantee that, then you cannot function.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you for sharing. And Milko, I think you will be happy what we hear here. We hear both focus and building it up step by step, and looking to solve the reliability issue, which is out of a company's hand, but has more with the location, more to do with the location.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I recognize a lot of that. And John, over to you now also, because you have been focusing on trends both in the American market and the local market, and you came up with something different for both of them, right?
Yeah. So in the local market, actually, firstly, before I go to your question, Mr. Repko, Mr. Milko, look, the gems that you're dropping, I just have to say thank you, because the okay, so I'll just go back to your question, and then maybe I can just the experience it shows, really. Okay, so in foreign markets, you have people who have, like, for example, this is a whole bean coffee, right? Everybody has a grinder in their house, or maybe a coffee machine or something. But in Ghana, this isn't the case, really. People don't actually have like coffee machines and all that. So I had to develop the Asili Premium, which, like I said, is just basically a coffee in a filter bag. So what it is that it's still the same level of quality in terms of raw material as the premium stuff that you drink in your cafes and pay the equivalent of maybe $3, $4, $5 for. But now I can give you a cup for, I think the dollar is about 6.2 to 1. So let's say about 20 cents, 18 cents. Yeah, so around 18 cents for a cup of gourmet coffee that you pay, I mean, $4 or $5 for in a restaurant. And it's also the first time now that I can confidently say that growers can actually afford to drink their own stuff as well. So basically, it's just democracy, right? So everybody is getting access to quality at the moment. This actually was a necessity, and this is why I'm so grateful to the OCIF, because we needed actually to develop a sustainable base locally as well, to keep the balance sheet neat before we wage our campaign in the foreign soil. So what happened was we got stuck where people were basically not buying this. And then the idea came because I know there are much larger companies that do instant coffees, and that's selling. Actually, I managed to get their exact sales data. So I knew that Ghanaians drink coffee, you know, so I wasn't really believing that they don't. And so I pitched this to the OCIF, and then they provided this. And now with this fast moving consumer good, the planting initiative that I started in the Akwapim areas, that's basically, I introduced coffee to the 3 districts in our region, right? And imagine if this didn't come and it's harvest time and people are asking me to buy their coffee, you know? So that's why I really hold the OCIF program close to my heart, right? It was a lifesaver because it came at the exact time as well. And how we have also taught our farmers to harvest is effectively to pick only when it's ripe. So it's gradually, it's a gradual process because coffee doesn't ripen uniformly, not here at least. So as they're gradually harvesting and supplying us, we are also able to purchase because we have a fast moving consumer good now that can sell to give us the necessary cash flow to sustain. So we are growing gradually together, you know, so that's the initiative is sustained by this product. So that's just basically where the disparity comes between local and the foreign market. The foreign, of course, is much more competitive. Everybody's in there with this, but yeah.
And of course, you have a completely new product for the local market.
Yes.
You're the first one there, so that's going to be less competition also.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's also it was also part of the consignment that went to the US actually, even though they're not sure. And this was why I was actually I'll tie this into why I was saying a huge thank you to Mr. Remco and Mr. Milko. Anybody who's tuning in now, right? It's actually a people game. Because effectively what's happened is the importer who's we're exporting to, they contacted us and we spoke for, I think, close to about 6 months. They basically a law firm that has a trading arm, huge connections across the United States. And we don't even have the capacity to really supply what it is that they want in terms of that quantum. But they are very patient with us. I was very transparent. Look, I can only do 2 tons a month. And to give you perspective, the US does 1 trillion, about 1 million tons per annum. So it's like a fish in a goldfish, in the ocean. So,
Yeah.
but they have the patience as well because they are looking for suppliers to build long-term connections with. So they are even discussing, like investment prospects, etc. And which is also good for, which is another reason why the OCIF is also good for you, because you've actually been through the mill and you can kind of wear it as a badge of honor because people know they've looked through your books and you've been provided certain facilities and you're repaying facilities, partial grants, etc. So, I mean, it ties in because it's ultimately down to a matter of trust as well. And as Mr. Milko said, people don't want to suddenly wake up and they're like, hey, the Maersk Sealand thing says the container should be here, but now it's not. What's going on here? Nobody wants any surprises, none of that. So I think that's a really huge point that was communicated across. And yeah, from where I sit, it's key, so key, so key. Thanks, so key.
That is really great to hear. And John, you're like my bridge to the next topic every time you say something. So really also it's as if you have this instinct where I want to go next. But just to mention to both John and Ethar, you're really inspiring everyone here. So I think also the creativity and the innovation coming from your side is incredible. So really also there are gems being dropped everywhere here in this webinar, I think. But the bridge I was gonna mention still to the next topic is, you say it's a people business, and that's the last topic I want to touch upon today because I know we're also going towards the end of this webinar. But the last topic is, how are there any good ways or less good ways to reach out to a potential buyer, because it is people business in the end. We know the temptation to send mass emails, for instance. We already mentioned trade fairs. Remco, any tips on what tends to work and what tends not really to work?
Well, I would say again, focus. There used to be a time when people would send emails with 20 attachments, 500 pictures, and 10,000 words. Obviously, if you get such an unsolicited email in your inbox, the first thing you do is throw it in the trash. So if you are approaching somebody you don't know, I think the first tip would be to find out who in that company is actually buying. There's a beautiful example of a colleague of ours, of Milko and mine, and he used to work with a company in Indonesia, and they wanted to supply candles to Zara. So they were in Indonesia, Zara is in Spain, and they managed to get a Spanish interpreter in Indonesia to call the Zara head office to find out who is actually in charge of buying candles within Zara, because Zara is huge. So they had the Spanish-speaking Indonesian person calling the head office. It took some time, but they managed to find out the details of this particular buyer. When they had the details, they made a very concise, tailor-made email for this person, and they've also followed up after it. Long story short, because they did their homework, they managed to get in, they managed to start a relationship, and they've been doing business ever since. Of course, this is a success story. There's also many stories where you fail, but that's also part of the game. Because maybe you have to write 20 people in order to connect with one person or one company. And that is also the kind of stamina, the kind of persistence and perseverance you really need to have. That's part of being an entrepreneur. And sometimes people are just not suitable for that. but they could be very good in production. Then I would say, hook up with somebody you trust who is good at that communication part. And then you could maybe be a successful tandem. Some people have it all. They know about production and they know about communication, but some people have more focused strong points. But I would say always keep it focused and to the point. And whenever you approach somebody, make sure you're speaking or mailing to the right person. Be persistent without being obnoxious. Don't call somebody 5 times a day. Send an email, wait for a week or 10 days and send a follow-up email, or maybe, you know, invest in a phone call, etc., etc. But yeah, you have to hang in there and make sure that you make a list of maybe 20, 25, maybe even 30 people that could be an interesting buyer for you. And then I come back to what we mentioned earlier. You have to do your research. That is one of the most important parts of this business, is that you research who could be your buyer. And in that way, you focus your attention at people that are really worthwhile of that attention.
Great. One of the tags, at least when we go online with this webinar, will be focus. Milko, from the fresh sector, something to add to it?
Yeah, I think the last thing that Remco said is a good thing. People that are worthwhile to work on, try to become a supplier to somebody, because in the end, there are also importers, customers who will never become customers, you know, who have already companies that they work with and are not looking for new suppliers. But if I look at fruit and vegetables and flowers, and I ask, so how did you find a new customer? Then it's not about email bombing and spamming anymore. That worked 20 years ago, but it is now the other. That works against you. That's for sure. Well, what I've seen mostly is that new contacts are the result of trade fairs. Particularly in horticulture, trade fairs are still very, very important. It's a way to show your product. It's the location where everybody comes together, where people can refer you to somebody else. And the networking is just more organic on a trade fair, on a trade ground. You can do, of course, also networking outside of trade fairs, and that also tends to work. I've been involved now since 4 years in the Jordanian medjool date industry, and I'm completely surprised how big these family networks are, because every time when I ask them, how did you find this customer in the UK or in Sweden? And 3 out of 4 times it's a family member, it's a nephew or something like that who knows somebody, and then business starts up. But that's, I think, something more specific for, let's say, the ethnic market segment. If you want to sell to supermarkets or large wholesale companies, then trade fairs and being able to, what Remco says, figure out who are the companies that you could aim for. Don't try to sell to everybody. You have to be picky yourself as well, where to put your time and your effort in. And the moment that you have contact on horticulture, it's always a good idea to invite somebody over. If you're in a country where there are more than one producer, then often an importer is interested in sourcing from that country or that region. And he's also interested to invest a little bit of time and maybe money in visiting your country. And when he's in your country, you can show your farm, you can show your setup, and that's a way to start building that relationship and to show that you are open to invest together with him in a new relationship and maybe work on new certification that's required for his market segment. So yeah, that's, I think, something more specific for horticulture, although I also heard it in other industries. If you have a factory, of course, you also want to show your factory. And something else I think that is important, that if you speak to a new potential customer, that you understand who you are, what are your strong points, and that you know how to bring your story to the importer, not be too pushy and not only try to sell general strength that everybody has, but really know how to communicate who you are and where you want to go and what your plans are for the future and what the role of an importer can be in that future together.
Yeah. So focus again, actually focus by knowing what you're good at. Yeah, keeps coming back as a theme. And we're really reaching the end of this webinar. I'm going to give the last words to John and Aether. And if you, because you've started this journey, export journey and your business journey, if you could give, this is one from Hannah also asking for in the chat, if you could give one piece of advice to the OC alumni present here today, what would it be from your point of view? And you can add to what we've heard or give something completely different. Your best piece of advice when you enter into international markets. John, if you would like to go first. Okay, you can have 2 sentences also. I will be flexible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, then I think we'll just split it in maybe 2.
Okay.
So first things first, before you sign anything, I mean, it's like a courtship, right? Before marriage, you know, like get to know your importer, you know, get to know them very, very well, especially if the quantities are huge. Maybe invest in a lawyer, tighten up your stuff. If you have anyone in their country who can maybe do some due diligence on them and find out where they stay. I mean, get to know them. You know, it's like courting someone on the internet. It's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Secondly, I think maybe you should focus on your actual capacity. You know, be realistic with yourself. If maybe it's better off for you to start locally and then gradually grow, because I mean, it's a different ball game altogether, and the losses that you can potentially suffer and lawsuits actually are I mean, you don't want to wake up with an email saying, I mean, you're going to court in some far off country and you've signed something that says you need to be there and you don't even have the money to take the bus to the next city, you know. So just in Akan, that's in Ghana, in Tree, they have a proverb, proverb that they say "Kawuntuma ne emfata watade," which basically means that cut your cloth according to the size of clothing that you can actually wear. So that's my bit. That's my bit for everyone.
That was a beautiful one. I like also how you explain all of this. Very good points here, John, and you get compliments also in the chat. Ithar, I see you laugh and I see you nod. You recognize this, I think, but what would your 1 or 2 pieces of advice be?
I think one of them, it would be, it's just what John just said, do it your way. Because when you started this, you had a vision, you know how to do it. Don't question this. Just do it your way while giving yourself the chance to understand the market. So yeah, it's totally fine to take it 1 step at a time, see what you can do and how you can do it. I think an example that I can give, there is no many trade fairs here around Sudan, and I started with the local market inside Sudan. So instead of waiting for a trade fair to come around and pitch my stuff, I actually take a basket from my products. I put a little brochure with a story of our products and where it came from. And I have a list of buyers that I'm targeting. I know who makes the decision, like they said before, and I just send that basket to them. So that's another form of a trade fair for me. This is a way for them to see my product. I did it my way. I started 1 step at a time, focusing with nearby buyers who can actually purchase a product, who I can produce the capacity or the amounts they need. So this is my advice. Don't go so fast. Take your time. Take it 1 step at a time, and definitely do it your way, because everyone have a unique perspective into things. And the fact that you started the business, that means you see something in the market and you want to test it and try it. So don't hesitate and go ahead.
I think those are beautiful words to end this panel discussion with. Be yourself, do it your way. There is a reason why you come as far as you have. And by doing all that also, it brings up the uniqueness, it brings up the focus. I would like to thank all of you. I think we've had a brilliant discussion here today, and that's thanks to the four of you, Remco, John, Ethar, and Milko. So thank you very much for sharing your experience, for bringing us into your world and thinking and dropping those gems, as John said. Thank you very much. I hope you've all enjoyed it, all of you who have listened to it. We will, as I said, follow up with an email, sharing some more links. Thank you from my side. And Adi, I will hand over to you to wrap up this session.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't think any more words are needed. This was such a great discussion, and it was really, really, really nice and fun to listen to. So thank you a lot for everybody being here, for all the alumni. We're going to continue developing masterclasses like these, so please join us in the future. Great agenda coming up in 2022, so I hope to see a lot more of you in the next couple of months. So thank you for all your great advice, and everybody have a great night. Actually, I think this is perfect. So see you next time. And also, if you have any feedback, by the way, you can drop it in the chat still. We'll still be here. So if you have any thoughts on how to improve these masterclasses, drop them in the chat, please.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you, Ether.
Thank you. Maybe, yeah.